Hello everyone, we welcome you to Glass Academy Webinars 2023. The theme for this year is Art and Science of Designing Responsibly. Today we have with us architect Sarika Agarwal, an academician and a practicing architect with over 27 years of professional experience in design, planning and execution of residences, commercials and neighborhood planning. She holds a master's degree in urban planning from IIT Roorkee. Over the years, architect Sarika held positions of head in various colleges administrating and engaging in socially responsible works while also taking consultancy projects at academic level for the institutes working on documentation and research-oriented works in the area of urban design. Currently, architect Sarika is working with Arena Consultancy Services Private Limited, which is based out of Delhi and Lucknow from 2022 as an associate planner and a senior vice president product specifications head, offering a wide range of consultancy services. The firm is currently involved with over 100 infrastructure projects across India and majorly railway stations. Welcome, Architect Sarika. We are delighted to have you here with us today, and we are looking forward to your presentation. Let's hear from you on the topic, daylight and urban forms. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Anvita, for the nice introduction and introducing me over here and inviting me for this webinar. So I'm going to share my screen for this daylight and urban form. This is a very common topic where we are like talking about responsibly designing, as the theme is art and science of designing. So we, right from the Indus Valley civilization, or when the civilizations happened, people have been designing responsibly so that it's a sustainable life. And here, like, I'm just going to share the presentation and tell you about the contemporary designing trends which are going on over the world. Yeah, share my screen. So very interesting topic. It has been like given and chosen as a theme also. So it's like about the daylight and the urban form, and all the urban forms are somewhere like related with the daylight. The way we design our cities, our buildings has to be related with how we are actually tapping the daylight into our buildings. So as we all know that what is daylight? Daylight is a light which is actually we are receiving from the sun, and it's a combination of the direct and the indirect sunlight during the daytime. And it's like also the diffused light, which is actually diffused through all the landforms, the water bodies, the plants, and everything which is available on the earth. So this is how, when the earth rotates, the daylight, and with the sun shines on the part of the earth, the daylight is there. So here, like, if you can see, I have just put some pictures where there's a reflection of the forms in the water bodies. And again, it is a reflection which is a part of the daylight. So when we talk about the daylight, as we are talking about all the diffuse light and the light reflected from the buildings, from the urban scapes, from the all the ground, the sunlight penetration which happens, and then it gets diffused. So we have got those, we create the urban canyons, and there's a lot of sunlight penetration and all. And there is a very, very interesting fact about the designing of the skyscrapers and the buildings from the 19th century. Even the modern architecture happened, that the buildings used to be tapered at the when it is going higher and higher. Why it happens? Well, I'll give you the answer at the end of the webinar, that why it happens and why the buildings were tapered. There's something which is very much directly related to the sunlight. So here, like these urban canyons also act as the pedestrian pathways, as is visible in one of the pictures. And these like create a very beautiful receding or the decreasing skylines of the cities when we talk about the the way of designing the buildings when we go higher and higher. And daylight is very, very significant for the health of the human beings, and that is how we design our windows. We design we give the setbacks in the buildings. We design the houses and the neighborhoods. Everything is very well dependent upon this daylight. It's not only the daylight, but I would say that it's about the wind also, the air also, because these are the most important aspects for the good health and the well-being of the human beings. So all the buildings, the houses, the neighborhoods have those kind of the apertures and the windows and the doors, so that we can actually have enough daylight inside the premises. Daylight also helps in actually creating the mood of the human beings, and that is how it affects the health of the human beings. Because if there is no daylight inside the premises, the mood will become very dingy, and it will affect the workmanship and even the health of all the people. So here, and this is another very important thing when we are talking about the daylight, how we create a space. So a space, the first space, what is the first space? A space is a shadow. So, for example, there is a tree and there's a shadow of the tree, and that creates in itself a space. So that is the space not defined by the boundaries, the space which is not defined by any kind of like there is a defined boundary, or there is some kind of a wall, but it is a space which is in itself has been defined by the shadows. So since like ages, when the construction and the civilizations started, so the primitive man and all, they started living in the caves initially, and when they started building and they understood the importance of space, so they realized the importance of space through these shadows, through the shadows of the sun which were falling on the earth, and this is how they used to create the spaces. And the space is created, and it creates a very wonderful play of the light and the shadows, as is visible in this picture also, that through some of the elements of the design, which are like kind of the roofs and the fins of a building, some very beautiful like space is being created through the play of the light and the shadows. And proper in terms of there is a lot of natural light, the sunlight is coming inside the whole atrium through the apertures. So the important aspects which are related to the daylight are building orientation, the form and the materials, the color schemes, daylight reflectors, screens, and the fenestrations. These are some of the strategies when we are designing a building. Building orientation is important as like how we orient our building towards the daylight factors. As we know that north-south orientation and east-west orientations, and sometimes northwest southeast orientation, these kind of orientations are given in the buildings as per the geographical area of where the building is located, and how we need to tap the daylight inside the building premises. So in the tropical regions it's different, and in the temperate regions it's different, because the altitude of the sun is different, and as per the altitude of the sun, we need to design and orient our buildings as per the summer solstice and the winter suns, so that we can tap the best potential of the daylight also and the wind direction, and so that our buildings are not consuming a lot of energy. So daylight is also very important when we are talking about in the energy conscious architecture, because it helps in understanding like how much the use of the heating and the cooling is to be done inside the building premises. Another thing, like for example, form and materials, because the way we use our form, the way we use our materials are also is an important factor. Color schemes, because the colors reflect the light, and this is how the building and the streetscapes look beautiful. So here some one of the buildings which is in Westfield, located in US, so it was like having very nice colors with this yellow and terracotta colors, and sometimes we use these terracotta facades and the different materials which are being played coming in the market to just improve the aesthetics of the building. Then we have the daylight reflectors and the screens in the fenestrations, a very very important um, again an element in the buildings, where we are actually trying to reduce the glares and the making the buildings energy conscious because of using these elements. So as we know, we have talked about the building orientation, and building orientation also takes consideration the site conditions like water bodies, wind direction, green cover, Microclimate also helps in dictating the heating and the cooling requirements of the building. So these things are created in the urban centers, in the districts where a lot of water bodies are there. So there are some examples like of Bawris in the Indian traditional system, that the step wells and the Bawris are created usually near the buildings in the hot and like dry regions, so that the microclimate is created. For example, in Rajasthan, Gujarat, even in Delhi, from the ancient ages, those Bawris were created. Here are some of the like again how the microclimate is created. So one of the urban design projects like High Life, where the entire project is completely a landscape project where a lot of water bodies and the fountains and the trees and the plants are given just to like coordinate with the high rise and the concrete jungle of the New York. So here, this entire project where you can take a pedestrian walk, a nice walk along with these buildings, gives a kind of a very calm feeling. So that this concrete jungle is just pacified with this particular kind of the idle laying railway line, which has been converted into completely a beautiful pedestrian walkway and connecting one part of the city, Chelsea Street, to the Hudson Yards. So as we talked about the summer sun and the winter sun, those, yeah, as per that, we just orient the building in terms of the east-west orientation or the south-west orientation, north-south orientation. Common materials like again the kind of the apertures which we are given in the windows, in the atriums, in the skylights, that also helps in understanding and tapping the daylight inside the building, how much of the skylight we are actually trying to enter into the buildings. Materials, like a lot of materials which are there, for example, there are the reflective glass, there's a laminated glass, and then there are insulated glass, which also helps in energy efficiency also, and enabling the exterior view, yet not enabling the interior views to ensure the privacy and the security of the buildings. Some of the images like of the atrium, where some glass sections are used, the aperture, the like straight aperture along with the polycarbonated sheet, high end polycarbonated sheet that has been used in the building. Then there's some reflective glass which have been used in one of the museum buildings, where you cannot see inside, but from inside of the building you can see outside the very different views. And some of the materials which actually like concrete finishes or the exposed brick finishes, with the exact size of the windows in the residential accommodations, where it is like required to have the proper sunlight and yet maintain the energy requirements of the particular residential neighborhoods. So types of glasses which we use in the atriums and in the residential neighborhoods also, where we need to have the skylight, especially in the temperate regions, that normal clear single sheet glass, then double glass glazings, double polycarbonate sheets, double glass glazings with double polycarbonate sheets and the reflective materials, and double polycarbonate with the reflective materials where the working plane is at the bottom of the buildings. Color scheme, as we discussed in the first slide, second slide, that it also helps in creating visual comfort, and that is why some of the matte surfaces are given rather than the illuminating surfaces or the gloss surfaces, so that the glare doesn't happen. So matte surfaces usually absorb the light. Daylight reflectors, again, it is important because we need to reduce the glare, and for that we need to give the kind of the reflectors which are not causing the discomfort to the eyes, and it should be like cost effective and the sustainable strategies when we are using inside the buildings. So how we usually use the top lighting and the side lighting, that clear acrylic glazings are used for the top lighting, and for the side lighting, usually like light shelves are used to reduce the glare. So this is very important factor in the different floors, that how we use the light shelves and give these light shelves become the elements of the building. So this is how the interiors and the exteriors are actually created. And sometimes with this side lighting, when it's not much required or the lot of light is there, so then screens in the fenestrations are given. So coming to the screens and the fenestrations, which are since sunlight is very essential for the visual and the thermal comfort, so usually to block the direct sunlight, the use of the screens and the fenestrations is done to reduce the glare, as was seen in the earlier building. And again, this has been used since ages, like use of jalis in the Mughal architecture, use of jalis in the Rajput architecture in the buildings of Rajasthan. And here, even if you see the tombs, and that has always been used in our buildings and becomes a kind of the passive solutions for energy responsive architecture. Also, we have used, there are some very nice contemporary buildings like Pearl Academy of Design in Jaipur, which has been taken the ideas from the traditional architecture and has been contemporized in the new buildings. This is how these buildings have been done. And there's another very good example of this particular buildings in Hyderabad, where most of the contemporary buildings have been given these screens to reduce that glare and to reduce the energy requirement of the building by using these screens. So some of the positioning of the windows, that how it is should be done and what is correct and what is not correct, to actually allow the daylight also and to allow the wind flow also. Kind of the shading devices which we use along with the glazing are the louvres, the fenestrations, the screens for, and these can be actually incorporated with the energy simulation softwares also, where this helps in understanding that what should be the size of the louvres, what should be the gap between the louvres, and what should be the aperture or the different gaps which are required in these roofs for the best energy optimization inside the building premises. As you see here, along with the glazing, the building has been given these roofs, and these kind of roofs are used all over the world now to actually make the buildings more energy conscious. So daylight centric planning always benefits the cities and the settlements, and we try to incorporate those kind of the strategies in the contemporary cities, because it's important for the health and the built environment, for the health of the human beings and for the built environment too. So here, most of the scientists and the people are engaged in these kind of the practices. So this is the picture which we see here is again from that High Line and the buildings around the High Line. So if you see one of the pictures where this glass, the facade of the building is like a glass, and it's a kind of a circulating glass which has been used in the building. So this is basically made because of this particular how to let the daylight enter into the building as per the time zone and as per the need of the building. So because in winters what happens is the day actually gets like by 5 p.m. it's completely dark and all, and in summers it's like the daylight happens till even 8 p.m. in this temperate region. So the building has been designed keeping these particular factors in mind through the simulation methods. Some more examples of the urban canyons and the microenvironment, how the microenvironment has to be created to let these concrete jungles make more habitable and to take care of the needs of the human beings. So here, like lot of trees and the big open spaces, so that this daylight enters into these skyscrapers, and it also helps in creating less warmer and to reduce the urban heat island effect. Some of the characteristics of the urban forms and how these what are the basic planning variables in these urban forms are usually the FAR, the site coverage, the open space ratio, area to perimeter ratios, capacity, and the average building height. These are some of the very important factors when we are designing our cities. And the environmental performances which are there is the daylight variability, the exposure to the sky, urban heat island, as I was talking about right now, and the solar heat gain and the solar potential. There are a lot of daylight challenges in the residential environment too, where apartments full of light with an interesting view are actually are the requirement of every human being, and usually it doesn't happen. And as we see, especially in the case of Delhi and Bombay, where there is like a lot of scarcity of the land, and their plot sizes are very narrow, and because of those plot sizes, when you build, and the setbacks are there only in the front setback and the rear setback, so the daylight doesn't enter inside the rooms. So there, like, designing is very important, how we design a apartment. And it is also very important that the layout, when it is being done at the level of the neighborhood planning, so what should be the plot sizes, what should be the way of designing a particular building, because without proper ventilation and light, the health of the human beings is affected. And this is my personal experience, that living in Delhi, like now, for the last 9 to 10 months I am in Delhi, and I have been looking for an apartment on rent. And whatever I see is like all the apartments are without light and ventilation, especially the areas which are like the urban villages, and even the areas where the builder floors are there. So this is very important, that how we actually design cities and how we make the layout of the cities, and what are the plot sizes we give, so that it doesn't become the affect the health of the human beings in the near future. So these cities might have been designed like long time back, around when the master plans were being done, so around 30 years or 40 years back, but the health of the citizens is affected right now. So we need to be considering those future aspects also when we actually do the designing. The direct sunlight and the like reflected sunlight, which is important to enter into the buildings. One of the examples from the hillside architecture. So there it's very easy to build these kind of shades and all. But then when we talk about the cities in the plains and in the metropolitan cities like Mumbai and Delhi, it really becomes difficult. So daylight is a part of the future cities, and it is very important that how we incorporate the daylight in our cities. And it is a basic human need, essential for our health, for our well-being. And the way the density is growing, the limited influence on the daylight situation within the building is happening. And it's a call for all of us, for all the architects, the designers, the planners, that we need to understand, and we need to maybe retrofitting or redesigning our cities, how we can do that to let the daylight enter into our cities. And some of the ways what have been being used, that within the neighborhoods, some open areas with more width, and the areas are being given so that a lot of daylight enters into these apartments, and use of the parks and the open spaces, which is important, so that more of the daylight is happening and entering inside the buildings, along with some glazing devices and the fenestrations and the screens which we give in the contemporary buildings. And the building height and building separation ratio needs to be taken care of, because as we see in the metropolitan cities like Delhi and Mumbai and Hyderabad and all, where this actually building height to building separation ratio is very less, and sometimes the buildings are actually just touched And this is the scenario which I have seen even in the cities like Shanghai and New York and Chicago. So I think with the examples of New York, where the building gap and the building height ratio was very less, Chicago has a better building height and building gap ratios, separation ratios, because there the buildings are little having more gaps in terms of the skyscraper buildings, but in New York it is not. So we it's a call for all the urban planners that how we need to actually design the cities with the and we are how we are designing our master plans, so that we have a better daylight inside the premises of the buildings for the proper cross ventilation and the daylight penetration inside it. Some of the examples, which is like again, I give credit to one of the websites only. The credits are there already there. So here, like how the energy is being trying to reduce inside the buildings, and the solutions which are being given for the health of the human beings, like bioswales, the sustainable strategies which we give, the kind of the surfaces to recharge the underground water also, and the sunlight penetration also, the kind of strategies, and the solar panels and the rainwater collection, all those kind of strategies are being used inside the buildings to have a better kind of um, better health of the human beings for the sustainability and the energy conscious ones. These are some of the references, and the picture credits goes to me myself, the author, because all the pictures have been taken by me myself. Thank you, Anvita.
Thank you, Architect Sarika. Your presentation was truly informative. Your insights into how daylight shapes and influences the urban landscape is a reminder of the strong interplay between the natural elements and built environments that we as designers need to consider while planning our future cities that perform. I'm sure the webinar undoubtedly enriched our viewers' understanding by encouraging them to rethink and reimagine their approach towards urban design and planning, and have a lot of learnings to take away today, and are also curious to know more. So I would like to take this opportunity to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
So the first question is, with rapid densifying urban environments, are there ways in which city infrastructure at large scale be retrofitted or redesigned to improve daylight access for existing buildings and spaces which may not have been designed keeping daylight in mind?
So definitely, yes, it can be done. There are a few ways like how we do it. First of all, it's about that we need to identify the buildings and the areas where the human beings are being affected because of the daylight. So at many a times, what happens is that some of the buildings over the years have become non-functional, and even the structures have also become like dilapidated. So by actually like making those structures and those buildings demolished and creating the open spaces in between those areas, that also helps in the health and the improvement of the cities and letting the daylight enter in. This is one of the ways which during the documentation process, when we were documenting some of the buildings and some areas, so we found these kind of the issues, and this was actually addressed, or it was given as a proposals. So this is one of the ways. And sometimes when it is not possible, then we need to understand the encroachments, whatever the encroachments are coming, because in most of the areas it's mainly because of the encroachment also. So the encroachments needs to be removed. So that is also one of the proposals which had always been taken care of and has been given in such kind of cases. So it's not that the thing cannot happen, it can be happen, because when we talk about the traditional planning was always actually done by taking care of these aspects. But in the contemporary planning, these things, because of the more viability and more commercial aspects, this thing was not taken care of. So we need to understand the bylaws, and we need to actually reform the bylaws also. So maybe in some cases the bylaws can be reformed, and that can also help in letting those like the planning which has been not done taking care of daylight can be done now by reforming the
Correct,
bylaw.
ma'am. Yes. So I think you answered half part of my next question. But anyways, to understand the connectivity of the question, I would like to ask, how does natural daylight influence the initial concept and design phases of urban planning? Are there any specific urban forms or layout that you were mentioning historically prioritize the optimization of daylight for our listeners to understand better?
So yeah, definitely. So daylight has always been important, and there are some kind of the planning when the urban planners came into the picture, and planning was given more due respect also. So a lot of cities and the different kind of the concepts were given for taking these daylight into consideration. So the gridiron planning, the garden city concept, and even the central business district concepts, the centric planning and the radial planning, all these kind of the plannings were actually considered in terms of like daylight, because the main priority was the daylight and the wind and the health of the human beings. And these neighborhood planning concepts always were taken, but being taken care of. So these are some of the examples actually which were as per the daylight. And as we see the city of Chandigarh, it is still considered to be a very healthy, and the people are happy over there. The happiness quotient is more because of these reasons only, because it has been planned like that. Even the city of Gandhinagar and many more cities like that, even the Lutyens Delhi, because it was considered as a radial planning, and those kind of factors were considered. So in Lutyens Delhi, you don't find any of the building which is devoid of the daylight. But the more areas when the city started expanding, where these particular concepts were not considered, then it happened like that. So these are some of the concepts. Even in Noida, like, because it is a planned city, and wherever the planned cities are there, Navi Mumbai is very contrast to the Mumbai. Navi Mumbai is actually considering all the areas with proper daylight, and the light and the ventilation is there in most of the buildings. So the new cities which are coming up are actually, the planners are considering that. So
Correct, ma'am. Absolutely, absolutely. So this kept me thinking, are there any emerging technologies or like design trends related to daylighting that you might find particularly exciting or promising for the future of urban design?
Yes, definitely the trends in terms of the new materials which are coming up, the new energy conscious means which we are talking about. We are talking about the sustainable ways, which I actually showed also in one of my slides. So they are promising, and they are like good for the future. Even the new experiments which are happening in terms of the innovations in the glass, in innovations in terms of the heat resistant materials, heat resistant coatings, and the types of the sheetings, and how we do the coatings on that, so that the heat is not penetrating inside the buildings, and the light is penetrating. So these kind of the sustainable strategies and the promising trends which are being innovated by the manufacturers, and in collaboration with the scientists and the designers. So these are actually very promising trends for the contemporary urban streetscapes, and the future cities which are important, along with the reducing the urban heat island effect, and the kind of the surface materials which we use on our roads and the pedestrian pathways, and the walkways and the roads. These are also very promising strategies which worldwide people are using it and trying to make our cities more habitable. So these are things. And moreover, as I traveled to few of the cities in January, so there also I saw the similar problems in terms of the building ratio and the gap ratio. So these when we just try to reduce these changes in the FARs and the bylaws, then it also will definitely affect the streetscapes.
Definitely, ma'am. Absolutely. So this brings us to our last question for the day. So with your experience in documentation and research-oriented development in urban design, we are very curious to know if there are any particular case studies or research topics that significantly impacted your understanding or perspective on daylight and urban form?
So yes. So for example, in some of the urban studios where we were documenting few of the cities, like documented Vellore, we documented Madurai, some of the urban villages, like for example, Khidki village, it was like in Delhi. So these were the very interesting areas where a lot of congestion was there. And as I answered my first question, that these kind of these areas actually helped me understanding about the retrofitting ideas and the documentation of the buildings which are not being used. Sometimes actually it also pisses me off that why these buildings which are actually not habitable and are not being used, and they are just lying vacant. So why can't we demolish them and make these places habitable and do some retrofitting kind of things? So but some of the examples have been done. For example, Kidwai Nagar, East Kidwai Nagar is one of the examples where the entire area was demolished and redevelopment was done. Even in some of the slum redevelopment projects, these things have been taken care of. So it helped me also in understanding how these redevelopment projects can happen. And there's a lot of potential and scope for these redevelopment projects in most of the cities of India and even worldwide. And it helps in well-being of the human beings of that particular city. And if our authorities and everybody takes care of these and start understanding these areas, so I think that the day is not far that everyone will have a very good life, and this housing problem will also be resolved. Because in some of the projects I have seen that even the housings have been made like that it has not been inhabited. People are not living there. So we need to understand and identify these kind of areas. And this is all what we have done in some of the cases where we have done few studies and identified those pockets and tried to create those green connects and urban connects and green corridors in those particular projects, and propose those projects in some of the cities. So this always helps, and it always helps and creates a kind of like psychological impact on the habitant of the cities also.
Absolutely, absolutely, definitely, ma'am. So that was very informative and insightful. So on behalf of all of us at Class Academy and Ethos, I would like to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anvita.